Hi, welcome back to Grammar Compass. In this lesson, we are going to talk about the X-bar theory. In our previous video, we discussed the phrase structure grammar. Kindly watch those videos if you haven't. The phrase structure grammar was very good in terms of representing constituency. However, there is a very big problem with it, and we are going to expose that inadequacy. Why do we even need another theory if the phrase structure grammar did the work for us? Now we need another theory, but first of all, let's talk about a brief history of the X-bar. Why did we need another theory? There was a problem with the phrase structure. That is, the phrase structure theory produces flat structures. Therefore, we needed a theory that will give us a more articulated structure, and that is the X-bar theory. So the purpose of the X-bar theory is to address this problem of the phrase structure grammar. And who proposed this theory? It was first presented comprehensively by Noam Chomsky in 1970, then revised by Jackendorf in 1977 in his book X-bar Syntax, and then again revised by Radford in 1988 in his book Transformational Grammar. This was the most complete introductory account of the X-bar theory. Now in this video, we are going to blend all of these and then look at Andrew Carney's perspective to X-bar framework. But first of all, there is a question to be answered. Why are we saying that the phrase structure grammar produces a flat structure? Let us explain. What we are doing here is scientific studies in grammar. We bring up a hypothesis and then we prove the hypothesis. If we have this sentence, the big book of poems with the blue cover is on the table. Here, if we take the noun phrase, that is, the big book of poems with the blue cover, in phrase structure, we are going to generate this rule for it. A noun phrase that has a determiner, and of course, the determiner is optional in a noun phrase. So here, our determiner is the. We have a noun phrase that also consists of an adjective phrase, which can be one or more. In our case, we have big as the only adjective phrase. Now the noun phrase consists of a head, that is N. In our case, it is book. We also have our prepositional phrases, which are also attached to the noun head. We have of poems and with the blue cover. That means we have two prepositional phrases attached to the noun head. So over here, we have a very flat structure. Why are we saying it is flat? We have placed all the modifiers at the same level with the noun head. This means that the determiner, the adjective phrase, the first prepositional phrase and the second prepositional phrase are all at the same level with book, which means they are all sisters dominated by only one mother node. So this is a flat structure. It makes it difficult to tell the C command relationships between the constituents. Now, what this flat structure here suggests is that we do not have any intermediate constituency. Therefore, we place all the phrases at the same level. But is that the case? We can prove this hypothesis that there is intermediate structures within this noun phrase. But since the phrase structure grammar does not address those intermediate structures, that is why we need X-bar grammar. So X-bar grammar includes the intermediate structures that are in group of words. If we put this phrase structure rule or the structure that we have here into test, it will fail because there is actually a test to prove that we have intermediate structures within the NP, and that is the replacement test. Let us see why this structure produced by the phrase structure fails the replacement test. What is the one replacement test? This is the test used to check for constituencies, especially in the noun phrase. So if group of words can be replaced with the word one, then it means that that group of words forms a constituent. So the one replacement test targets nodes that do not form a constituent in our phrase structure tree. Let us consider this sentence. I bought the big book of poems with the blue cover, not the small one. What group of words does this one replace? It replaces book of poems with the blue cover. So we can say I bought the big one. So it means that book of poems with the blue cover forms a constituent. Therefore, if we take the whole noun phrase, that is the big book of poems with the blue cover, book of poems with the blue cover forms a constituent because it can be replaced with one. I bought the big one. But when we apply the phrase structure rules, it fails to account for this constituent. Let us see. This is the tree which will be derived from this in the phrase structure. We have this noun phrase, the big book of poems with the blue cover. Since this is an intermediate structure, book of poems with the blue cover, then where is that intermediate structure in our tree? We didn't account for it. So book of poems with the blue cover can be replaced with one. It means it is an intermediate constituent. But the phrase structure rule does not account for this intermediate constituent. We have generated just a flat structure where the noun head is modified by prepositions and an adjective phrase placed on the same level. This is why we are saying that the phrase structure fails to account for intermediate constituent. If book of poems with the blue cover forms a constituent, then where is that constituent? We didn't account for it. This is where the phrase structure rules fail. Now, apart from targeting book of poems with the blue cover, we can also target other constituents within the noun phrase with the one replacement test. Let us see that. Now, we can use the one replacement test to target book of poems. For example, I bought the big book of poems with the blue cover, not the small one with the blue cover. So one replacement test here targets book of poems, so not the small book of poems with the blue cover, which means that since book of poems can be replaced with one, I bought the big one with the blue cover, then book of poems forms a constituent. But on our tree diagram in phrase structure, where is that constituent? We have placed everything on the same level. Therefore, we have failed to account for book of poems as an intermediate constituent. We do not have that on our phrase structure. So this means that the phrase structure grammar rules generates flat structures where all modifiers are placed at the same level with the noun head, and we need a theory that will include intermediate structures, and that is where the X-bar framework comes in. Now, there is one more interesting thing, that is, we can even target big book of poems with the blue cover when we replace the determiner over here with the demonstrative this. So we can say I bought this one. So the one will replace big book of poems with the blue cover. So if we do that, this is what we have. So I want this one. So I want this book of poems with the red cover, which means that big book of poems with the blue cover, the part starting from the adjective phrase to the end, forms a constituent. Therefore, there is an intermediate constituent that is formed in this noun phrase, and that is this part, big book of poems with the blue cover. But on our phrase structure, we do not have that intermediate constituent, which means that our phrase structure is inadequate to account for all constituents within a phrase. Therefore, we need a savior, we need a messiah, and that is the X-bar theory, which focuses on these intermediate constituents. So we need to revise our phrase structure rules for the noun phrase. We don't want flat structures anymore. Now, in order not to arrive at flat structures, we propose this structure. Now, over here, we have 3 n bars. We have an n with an apostrophe on top. We call it the n bar. And these n bars stand for our intermediate structures. The structures within the NP that can be replaced with 1. So, for example, you can say the 1. So that 1 replaces big book of poems with the red cover. So that is our first n bar. Now our next n bar targets the big one. The big one. So the big book of poems with the blue cover. Our last n bar over here targets book of poems. So we say the big book of poems with the blue cover. We cannot replace the head noun with 1. So you can say the big one of poems with the blue cover. That is not correct in English. It may be in other dialects. Based on this tree, we can propose this rule for the noun phrase. You can have a noun phrase that consists of a determiner, which is a sister to the n bar. That is what we have here. So the 1. Now from here we can have an n bar modified by an adjective phrase or an n bar modified by a prepositional phrase. Why do we have 2 alternatives over here? We will explain it. This means that at the intermediate level you can attach as many modifiers and qualifiers as you want. It can be repeated over and over. So over here we can see that we have modifiers and qualifiers. So at the first intermediate level, we have a modifier, adjective phrase, big, modifying the n bar that contains the noun head. Now in our next intermediate category, we have our PP, which is with the blue cover, qualifying our n bar, which contains the noun head. So this means that when it comes to the intermediate levels of the n bar position, it is iterative. If there are modifiers or qualifiers, then they must all be sisters to this intermediate level. So the last step, now we have the noun head book, which is qualified by of poems, our prepositional phrase. Now notice that we don't have any n bar, which means the noun head is not an intermediate category. You cannot replace it with 1. Let's try that. Can you say the big one of poems with the blue cover? That is not correct in English. It may be correct in other languages, but here you can't replace the noun head with 1. It is never in an intermediate level. This is the set of rules for the noun phrase. At the topmost, you get a noun phrase with a determiner paired with an n bar. At the second level, you have modifiers and qualifiers attached to the n bar. I have already mentioned that this level, it is iterative. It depends on the number of modifiers and qualifiers that you have in a sentence. This means that you can repeat the n bar as many times as you want, depending on the qualifiers and modifiers that you have in the noun phrase. Now, the adjective phrase big was a modifier and we paired it with the n bar. Now, the prepositional phrase with the blue cover was also a qualifier and we paired it with the n bar. But why didn't we pair the prepositional phrase of poems with an n bar? We have explained that the n is the noun head and therefore it cannot be replaced with 1. That gives us one reason why we don't have an n bar. But This also explains that the relationship between book and then of poems is different from the relationship between the head, book, and the other modifiers and qualifiers. So we will explain the modifiers or qualifiers which can be paired with the head and those that should be paired with the N bar. Take note of our new rules for the NP. Don't worry about drawing the tree structures right now. Alright, so currently this is what we know about the noun phrases. In our X-bar rule, so take note, the NP introduces the determiner, and then we have the N-bar rule which allows us to attach modifiers and qualifiers, and we know that this particular rule is iterative. It is self-recursive, meaning we can repeat it as many times as we want. So you can have as many N bars as you want in a sentence, depending on the number of modifiers or the number of qualifiers that you have. And then we have our last noun phrase rule, that is the one that introduces the head. So these are the three major rules of the noun phrase. Apart from the noun phrase, do we have evidence of intermediate structures in the other phrases as well? If we do not have, then it means that our X-bar rule is very inaccurate. But if we can prove that we have intermediate structures in other phrases as well, then we can depend on the X-bar to account for those intermediate structures. Now that we have been able to identify the intermediate structures within the noun phrase, let us talk about the VP. So here we have this sentence. The children always really buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed. And Victor does so too. Now, we have this verb phrase. Always really buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed. The entire structure is a verb phrase. If we can do the replacement test, then it means that this verb phrase also contains intermediate structures. If the replacement test doesn't work here, then it means that our X-bar hypothesis is wrong. So we are going to see whether we can apply replacement test on the VP as well. We cannot apply the one replacement test. The one replacement test applies to noun phrases, but we have a verb phrase, so we are going to use the does so too replacement. So instead of replacing the string of words with one, we will do so with does so too. You can also use does too, or does so, or does, depending on what sounds right to you. Now let us target the intermediate categories within this VP. In our phrase structure rule, the whole of this VP generates this flat tree where the verb head is modified and qualified by a number of phrases. All of them are at the same level as the verb head, which means we have a flat structure. The phrase structure doesn't account for intermediate constituents, but can the X-bar theory do that? Now let us try to replace the constituents within this VP with does so too. Starting with this. The children always really buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed, and Victor does so too. What does this does so too replace? We can see that it replaces the entire verb phrase. That is, the children does so too. So the children always really buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed, and Victor does so too. So it means that the does so too replacement replaces the entire verb phrase. That is what we have here. Now, do we have that intermediate structure in our tree? No, we don't have that intermediate structure. This means that our phrase structure tree that we've drawn is very ugly. Let us probe further to see whether we can find other intermediate structures within the verb phrase. let's target the next group of words. The children always really buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed. Now this time we are targeting a different group, that is, and Victor always really does so too. So always really does so too. So here does so too replaces buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed, as we can see on the diagram. But do we have an intermediate verb which accounts for it? No. So it means that this phrase structure, the tree that we've drawn, doesn't account for those intermediate structures, but we need them. That is why the X-bar theory is the best. Now let us prove further to target other intermediate constituents within this VP. We have this. The children always really buy the students a phone in the room quietly indeed, and Victor always really does so quietly indeed. Now we have the children always really quietly indeed. So does so over here replaces buy the students a phone in the room. So since the replacement test works over here, buy the students a phone in the room, it means that there is an intermediate structure. There is the presence of an intermediate structure. But where do we have that intermediate constituent within this noun phrase? We do not have that. So this means that the phrase structure rule does not account for all the constituents within a group of words, but the X-bar does that. Now, I hope you agree with me when I say that the phrase structure rules must then be revised to include the intermediate structures. And that is where the X-bar comes in. Now, if that is the case, how will a VP tree look like? Here is the proposed tree from now. First of all, we have a VP that moves to a V-bar. Now, the sentence we are dealing with is, AC often sings hymns loudly in the library, but Grace does so too. So the does so too over here targets the entire verb phrase. Therefore, we have an intermediate level, a verb. Let us target another constituent within the verb phrase. Now we have AC often sings hymns loudly in the library, but Grace seldom does so. So here we have our adverb modifier, but the does so replaces sings hymns loudly in the library, which means that we have another verb which is modified by an adverb phrase. Now let us move on to the next verb. This intermediate category, what does it target? AC often sings hymns loudly in the library, but Grace seldom does so in the library. So does so over here replaces sings hymns loudly. Sings hymns loudly. So we have another intermediate structure. This sings so loudly is modified by a prepositional phrase. Is qualified by the prepositional phrase, that is, in the library. So we have that structure over here. Now our next verb targets another constituent within the verb phrase. AC often sings hymns loudly in the library, but Grace seldom does so quietly in the library. Now here, does so replaces sings hymns. Sings hymns. Now that is the verb category that we have here, and it is qualified by the AdvP, loudly. We do not have the structure of the AdvPs yet, so we will use this triangle to represent the undeveloped structures. Now, can we use the does so replacement to replace the head? Remember, you can do that with heads, so you cannot say AC often sings hymns loudly in the library, but Grace seldom does so hymns loudly in the library. It doesn't even make sense. So we don't have any verb category again, because we can't replace the other constituents with that so. So we are left with the head and then the object, that is him, our noun phrase. This is the proposed verb phrase rule. Therefore, we have to revise our verb phrase rules. First of all, in X-bar, you would have a verb phrase that moves to a verb bar, just as we have over here. Then, our verb bar can be attached with modifiers or qualifiers. So there can be modifier, an adverb modifier, or an adverb qualifier, or a prepositional qualifier. At the bar level, you can attach modifiers and qualifiers. The last level of our VP is where we have the verb head, and the direct object of the verb is always a sister to the verb head. So this is a similar structure like that we had for the noun phrase. For the noun phrase, we had the specifier, the determiner, and an end bar. And then at the second level, at the bar level, we had the end bar, which can be attached with modifiers and qualifiers. In the last rule, we had the N, the noun head, which has an optional modifier. This is the rule that we are going to apply for verb phrases. Now, what about the other phrases as well? The PPs, the adjective phrase, and then the adverb phrase. Let us see whether those structures have intermediate constituents. Now, taking this sentence, he eats beans and shovels hay with a fork. The fact that we can conjoin eats beans and then shovels hay means that together they form a constituent. We can say he does so with a fork. That is why we have the conjoined verb bars over here. That is the structure that we have over here. So this intermediate category is conjoined. So we have conjoined intermediate categories, and both of them are modified by the preposition with a fork. So here we have eliminated the ambiguity in phrase structure grammar, where the prepositions, where all the modifiers and qualifiers are placed at the same level. Here we have eliminated that inaccuracy. The prepositional phrase that we have here with a fork is qualifying the verb bar, that is, eats beans and shovels hay. This is only possible in X-bar grammar. Now let us talk about intermediate structures within the prepositional phrase. We know from phrase structure that when you have a prepositional phrase, it consists of a preposition and an optional noun phrase. That is also another question, whether the noun phrase in a prepositional phrase can be optional. But that was the rule that we developed in phrase structure grammar for PPs. Now the prepositional phrase can be complex because we have idiomatic prepositional phrases which are more complex than the one that we have here. For example, Dr. Anto is very in love with his class. Here we have in love, which can be modified by very and then qualified by with his class. Now here we can develop a flat rule, a flat structure for this prepositional phrase. That is, the preposition is modified by an adverb phrase very, and then it is qualified by the NP love, and then qualified by the PP with its class. Now if we draw the tree for this prepositional phrase in phrase structure grammar, this is what we are going to have. The adverb phrase will be a sister to the head preposition, which is also a sister to the NP, which is also a sister with the PP with its class. This is a flat structure. Can we test for intermediate levels or intermediate structures within this prepositional phrase? Of course, we can do that. Now, what is that intermediate structure? In prepositional phrases, you cannot do the one replacement test as you do for the noun phrase. You cannot do the did so or does so too test as we did for the verb phrases. Now the test that we are going to use for the PP is the so replacement test, which means we can replace some constituents within the prepositional phrase with the word so. Let us have this example. Dr. Anto is very in love with his class, but Dr. Nso is less so. So the less so here targets in love with his class. But do we have that intermediate structure over here? No, we don't have it. So this means that this structure is a flat structure. We didn't account for the intermediate level. We still have another intermediate level in the PP, which is not in love with his class. And that is, Dr. Anto is very in love with his class, but Dr. Nso is less so with his class. So here we target a minor intermediate category, in love, which means this also forms a bar level. But do we have that intermediate category shown on our prepositional phrase here? No. So this means that the phrase structure does not also account for intermediate structures within the prepositional phrase. Therefore, we need to revise our rules. Now, this is the rule that we propose, that the PP consists of a P bar, that is an intermediate level, and then this intermediate level can be attached with modifiers and qualifiers, and the last level introduces the preposition and then the noun phrase. That is exactly what we have over here. So the prepositional phrase moves to a P bar every time. Now over here, the P bar, the intermediate level that we have here is this. Dr. Anto is very in love with his class, but Dr. Nso is less so. Dr. Nso is less in love with his class. So targets in love with his class. That is the intermediate level that we have here, in love with his class, which is modified by the adverb phrase. That is what we have in our rule. Now, when we come down a bit, we have another intermediate level. That is when we target the so replacement with in love. So you can say that Dr. Anto is very in love with his class, but Dr. Nso is less so with his class. So over here, we target in love, which can be replaced with so with his class. This is the new rule for the PPs. Now try to establish some similarities regarding the rules we have discussed so far for the noun phrase, for the verb phrase, and then for the prepositional phrase. Now the thing is, we cannot use the one replacement with adjective phrases. In the same way, we can do the does so too for the adjective phrase, but we can use the so as the replacement test for adjective phrases. So for example, you can say that Mike is very interested in phonetics, but less so in phonology. So the less so targets interested, meaning there is also evidence of intermediate levels within the adjective phrase, but there is less evidence for it, unlike the noun phrases and then the verb phrases. Now what about the adverb phrase? We can say that Mike walks extremely slowly to the school, but Sam walks less so. What does the less so target in the adverb phrase? It targets slowly to the school. So Mike walks extremely slowly to the school, but Sam walks less slowly to the school. So replaces slowly to the school, meaning we have evidence of intermediate structures within the adverb phrase as well, but this evidence is not that strong like we had. But since we are dealing with the X-bar theories and we have tested intermediate levels for both noun phrases and verb phrases, we have been able to see that at least we have a little bit of evidence to show intermediate structures within these phrases. But for parsimony reasons, we will assume that the adjective phrase has these rules, and then the adverb phrase also has these rules. We say parsimony in the sense that since the other phrases have these rules, we assume that the adjective phrase and the adverb phrase also have the same rules. Now for the adjective phrase, it moves to an AdjP bar. Then the AdjP bar, that is the intermediate category, can also be attached with optional adverb phrases as modifiers and optional prepositional phrases as qualifiers. And this AdjP bar moves to an Adj, that is the head, which is qualified by an optional prepositional phrase. We have the same rule for the adverb phrase. The adverb phrase moving to an AdV bar. At the intermediate level, we have the AdV bar modified by an AdvP or qualified by a prepositional phrase. And then we have the last level, that is the AdV bar moving to the AdV, the adverb head, qualified by a prepositional phrase. We have this example on our tree over here. Extremely slowly to the school. The one that we have here. So Mike walks extremely slowly to the school, but Sam walks less so. Less so targets slowly to the school. Based on our rules, when you have an AdvP, it will first move to an AdV bar. Then at the intermediate level, you will start attaching your modifiers and qualifiers. So at the first intermediate level, that is extremely slowly, we attached the qualifier to the school. And in our next intermediate level, that is slowly, we attached the adverb phrase modifier, and we further broke down to an AdV bar and then finally to an AdV. So note that the bar levels can be replaced with so. So over here we have Mike walks extremely slowly to the school, but Sam walks less so. So the less so replaces slowly to the school. That is what we have here. And then the next bar level which the so targets is slowly. So we have Mike walks extremely slowly to the school, but Sam walks less so to the school. So the so targets slowly. That is why we have this AdV bar. Now this is a coordinated adjective phrase. Let us apply the rules here. Very bright blue and dark green is our adjective phrase, and it moves to an AdjP bar. Now this intermediate category, that is bright blue and dark green, is modified by the adverb phrase very. That is what we have here. And the intermediate category, that is bright blue and very dark green, also contains other intermediate categories which are conjoined. So we have the intermediate category bright blue and another intermediate category dark green, which is conjoined by the coordinator and. So blue as the intermediate category in the AdJ is modified by bright, whilst here the AdJ bar green is modified by the AdvP. So we have evidence of intermediate categories in all the phrases in English. We can draw some generalizations among all the rules that we have discussed so far. This will help us to identify similar patterns in all the rules that we have discussed. Now, let us draw some generalizations. Now, these rules that we have developed, the ones that you see on the left, are the rules that we have so far for the phrases. This excludes the determiner phrase, the tense phrase, and the complementizer phrases. Over here, we have rules for the noun phrase. We have rules for the verb phrase, rules for the adverb phrase, rules for the adjective phrase, and rules for the prepositional phrase. Can't you see some patterns in the rules that we have over here? Look at them closely. These are the kind of things that we want to establish here, that there are some unique patterns among all the rules. Let us see the first generalization that we can draw. That is, for each major category, there are 3 types of rules. So for each of the categories, for noun phrase, we have 3 types of rules. 1, 2, 3. For the verb phrase, we have 3 types of rules. 1, 2, 3. For the adverb phrase, 3 types of rules. 1, 2, 3. For the adjective phrase, 3 types of rules. 1, 2, 3. And for the prepositional phrase, 3 types of rules. 1, 2, 3. At the top of the rules, we have what we call the specifier rule. So the first rule of all the categories is called the specifier rule. So in the noun phrase, the specifier rule introduces the determiner. So the determiner is the specifier in the noun phrase. In the verb phrase, the first one is the specifier rule. The verb phrase doesn't have any determiners, so we don't have a determiner as a specifier. That's why you see only the V bar. Now in the adverb phrase, here is the specifier rule, the AdV bar. It doesn't have any determiner. This is the specifier rule, no determiner. And in the prepositional phrase, this is the specifier rule. So it is only the noun phrase that has the determiner as a specifier, and we are going to change this rule when we look at the determiner phrases. So the first in all the phrases is the specifier rule. Now what about the second rules? The second rules is the rule that iterates. We can repeat this rule many times as we want. We call the second rule the adjunct rule. So for example, in the noun phrase, the N bar, this is the adjunct rule. It is the second rule. And this second rule iterates. You can repeat them as many times as you want. This is where we attach modifiers and qualifiers. So this can generate many N bars depending on the number of modifiers or qualifiers that we have. In the verb phrase, this is the adjunct rule, where you attach modifier and qualifier adjuncts to the verb bar. In the adverb phrase, this is the adjunct rule, where the adverb is modified by another adverb phrase. Now in the adjective phrase, we have the adjunct rule. That is the second rule. The AdJ bar can be modified by an adjective phrase. And in the prepositional phrase, we have the P bar, the adjunct rule over here, where the P bar can be qualified by a prepositional phrase. So this is the generalization that we can give to the second rule generated by these phrases. Now what about the third rule? The third rule is the complement rule. This is the rule that terminates the recursion of the adjunct rule. Remember we said that for the second rule, that is the adjunct rule, we can repeat the N bars as many as we want, depending on the number of modifiers or qualifiers that we have. This is the adjunct rule. But when it comes to the third rule, it is the complement rule. So this is the rule that introduces the head. So in the noun phrase, the complement rule is the last rule, and it introduces the head, that is the noun. In the verb phrase, the complement rule is the last one, which introduces the verb head and the complement. In the adverb phrase, the complement rule is this one, and it introduces the AdV bar and a prepositional phrase. And in the adjective phrase, the complement rule introduces the adjective head, which can be qualified by an optional prepositional phrase. And in the prepositional phrase, the complement rule is the last rule that we have here, which introduces the head. So this stops the recursion of the adjunct rule. So that is the first generalization that we can make. For each of the rules, there are three types. The first of the rule is the specifier rule. Then we have the second, that is the adjunct rule. It is the rule that can be repeated as many times depending on the adjunct qualifiers or modifiers that we have. And the last rule is the rule that introduces the head. We call it the complement rule. So that's one generalization that we can make among all the rules that we have developed so far. What is the next generalization? Let us see. The second generalization is that the head is the only obligatory element. We call it headedness or endocentricity. So the head is the only element that must be there in every phrase. So for example, when we take the noun phrase, the head is the noun. So we can see the N repeated in all the three rules. It is the only obligatory element. In a verb phrase, the verb is the head. So we can see they repeated in all the rules. In the adverb phrase, the verb is the head. We can see that the adverb phrase contains adverbs, AdV, in all its three rules. And in the adjective phrase, we have the adjective in all the three rules. In the prepositional phrase, we have the preposition in all the three rules. So for example, you cannot have the NP without an N in it. It is not possible. And you can't have a VP without a V element in it. You can't have an AdVP without an AdV element in it. You can't have an AdjP without an AdJ element in it. And finally, you can't have a prepositional phrase without a prepositional element in it. This is the second generalization. Now let us talk about the third generalization, which is also very important. That is, all non-head material is both phrasal and optional. That means, if the constituent is not the head, it must be optional and it must be a phrase. This is very important. Take note. So in the noun phrase, the noun is the head, right? So over here, we can see that the obligatory element is the N bar, which contains the head for the specifier rule. But we can say that in the noun phrase, this one is an exception because the determiner over here is not phrasal. So it is an exception to the generalization that we are making. Now, if you move on to the next level, we can see that only the N bar is obligatory. The rest of the adjuncts that we will attach, this is the adjunct rule. So all the adjuncts that we attach with the N bar must be phrasal and they are optional. Now here, the obligatory element is the noun. This is the complement rule. Every modifier that comes with the head noun should be phrasal. We cannot have a head which is qualifying a head. No. The only element that should be obligatory is the head. Every other modifier or qualifier should be optional. We have the same applying to all the other rules that we have. When we take the verb phrase, the verb bar is obligatory. That is why we don't see any parentheses around it. Now when it comes to the adjunct rule, when we are attaching adjuncts to the verb bar at the intermediate category, any adjunct that we will attach should be a phrase, and those phrases are optional as well. When it comes to the adverb phrase, we have the same thing. Everything that is not the head must be optional and it must be in a phrase form. Take note of that. So you cannot have two heads which are sisters. It will never happen. One of them must be the head and the other, which is modifying or qualifying it, must be a phrase form. So always take note of this. That is the third generalization that we can make among all the rules that we have discussed. So the only obligatory element is the head. If you attach any modifier or qualifier, then that modifier or qualifier must be in a phrase form and it is optional. So what is the goal of X-bar theory? First of all, we are trying to simplify the system of rules. So right now, I hope you are gradually getting the meaning of these rules that we have developed. We know that the first of every rule is the specifier rule. The second is the adjunct rule, which is iterative. It is recurring. It can occur as many times as we want. And the last of all the rules here is the complement rule, which stops the recursion. So the complement rule always introduces the head and optional modifiers, if any. So here, the goal of the X-bar theory is to simplify the system of rules. We didn't get this opportunity in the phrase structure grammar. And then one other goal of the X-bar theory is to capture intermediate structures. That is what we have proven so far, that there are intermediate structures in all the phrases in English. And then last but not least, the X-bar theory seeks to capture cross-categorial generalizations. That is what we have seen. So we have three rules for every phrase: the specifier rule, the adjunct rule, and the complement rule. The only rule that can repeat itself is the second rule, the adjunct rule, where you attach adjuncts to the bar levels. If there are many adjuncts, you will keep on attaching it to the bar levels until it is left with the complement, which stops the recursion. So take note of these generalizations. Now, in order for our rules to make sense, then we must use variables to represent all the rules that we have, so that we can make these generalizations. First of all, we are going to use variables to stand for each category. We will use X to stand for any category. So if you see XP, it can be NP, it can be a noun phrase. XP can be a noun phrase, a prepositional phrase, an adverb phrase, an adjective phrase. So the X stands for any category, whether a noun, verb, adjective, adverb, or preposition. And the X must be consistent through the three rules. If the X stands for the noun, it means that for rules of the noun phrase, the noun must be consistent through the three rules, just as we see here. So over here, we see that the noun was found, N bar. In the second rule, the noun was found. In the last rule, the noun was found. So the X, which can stand for any category, must be consistent through the three rules. So this is the general rule for the specifier. The specifier rule states that an XP, which can stand for any phrase, gives us an optional specifier and an X bar. So if it is the noun phrase, it gives us an optional determiner and an N bar. Now the specifier is the determiner, but not all the phrases have determiners. So for phrases without determiners, the XP phrase level is going to give you a bar level. So in the VP will move to a bar because it doesn't have any determiner. For the prepositional phrase, the prepositional phrase will move to a bar because at the first level, it doesn't have any determiner. So that is what we have here. The YP, which stands for specifiers, are optional, and it is only found in the noun phrase. So it is only in the noun phrase where you can get a determiner and then a bar level, the specifier rule. The next level is where we have the adjunct rule. So we will use these variables to represent the adjunct rule. Only the X must be mandatory. So if it is the noun, only the noun must be mandatory. That is why we see the X not in parentheses. But all the modifiers and qualifiers that attach, since they are adjuncts, must be phrasal. They are optional. So we can see this consistency in all the rules that we have over here. These are the intermediate levels. For example, if we pick this intermediate level, it consists of the X bar and then an optional phrase. This phrase doesn't belong to the X. It belongs to a different category. When we check from the verb phrase, at the intermediate level, we have the V bar, which can be qualified by an optional adjunct. But this adjunct must be a phrase. In case we have another adjunct, it means we are going to repeat the verb bar. So the verb bar will take the other adjunct that we have, and it should also be a phrase of a different category. That is exactly what we want to emphasize over here. Now we have the last rule, that is the complement rule, and we represent it with X, which is the head. So the complement rule is the last rule of the phrases. So in the verb phrase, that is this one. So the complement rule terminates the recursion of all of these adjunct rules, and then the complement rule is given the head word and an optional qualifier or complement. So in a verb phrase, we have the verb head and an optional qualifier. So if there is no complement of the verb head, then it means that when you have a verb bar, it will move to a V and then it will stop. For the prepositional phrase, we can see that this is the phrasal level. This is the specifier rule. But since prepositions do not have determinants, when you have a prepositional phrase, it will move straight to a preposition, a P bar, and not a P bar which is modified by another category. Prepositions don't have determinants, so prepositional phrases move straight to a P bar. Now from here, we have our adjunct rules. So first of all, this adjunct is attached to a P bar, so the adjunct rule is recursive. We had another adjunct which was also attached to the P bar. So more adjuncts you have, then more P bars you are going to have. Then the recursion stops when it gets to the head, the P. This is the complement rule. So the complement is not a sister to a bar level, it is a sister to the head. These are some generalizations that we can make about these rules we have developed so far. Alright, so now we've been able to establish some generalizations of our rules so far. We have three different kinds of modifiers in X-bar theory, and those modifiers are specifiers, adjuncts, and complements. Without understanding these, then you can't be able to draw accurate X-bar trees. So let us take each of them to see what they mean. The specifier. In our noun phrase structure, we learned that the specifier is the determiner, which is a sister to an end bar. This is the rule for all specifiers. Specifier is a daughter of a phrase and a sister to a bar. You have to take note of this. A specifier is a daughter of a phrase and a sister to X bar. Meaning, if you have a noun phrase which has a determiner and then the noun head, that specifier, that determiner, should be a sister to a bar level, and then that determiner should be a sister to an end bar and a daughter of the noun phrase. That is the specifier rule. So far, the only specifier that we have identified is the specifier of noun phrases, that is the determinants. We will change the rules when we apply the X-bar theory to functional categories like the determiner phrases, the tense phrases, and the complement phrases. So write this somewhere. A specifier is a daughter of a phrase and a sister to a bar level. So if you have a noun phrase with a determiner, the determiner, which is the specifier, should be a sister to an end bar, not an end, and it should be a daughter of the noun phrase. That is for specifiers. What about adjuncts? Unlike specifiers, an adjunct is a daughter of an X bar and a sister to X bar. Take note, an adjunct is a daughter of X bar and a sister of X bar. So for example, if we have this tree, provided the tree for the noun phrase, if we have an adjunct as a modifier or qualifier in the noun phrase, then it must be a daughter of an end bar and a sister to an end bar. So adjuncts are never daughters of the phrase. They are daughters of the X bar and then sisters to the X bar. Now in this one, we can see that the adjunct appeared on the right hand side of the X-bar. You can also have an adjunct which is also a sister to an X-bar, but since it is a modifier, it will appear at the left hand side of the X-bar. So this is the adjunct rule. The adjunct rule stipulates that the X-bar, which is one projection of the X, consists of an optional adjunct, that is the ZP. It stands for phrases that modifies or qualifies the nouns. Should be a sister of the X-bar, should be a sister of the X-bar. So the adjunct can appear at anywhere within the phrase. It can appear at the right hand side of the X-bar, and it can appear at the left hand side of the X-bar. A complement is a daughter of an X-bar, but a sister to an X. Here is how a complement tree would look like. So a complement is a daughter. So here is our complement, our ZP. It is a daughter of the X-bar and a sister to the X, which is the head. These are the three different kind of modifiers that we have. We have the specifier, which is found only in the noun phrase. We will change this rule. This rule is not correct, so we will change it. But for now, just accept it that a specifier is the daughter of a phrase and a sister to X-bar. Specifiers are only found in noun phrases based on our discussions so far. So the determiner is the specifier. It must be a daughter of a noun phrase and a sister to an N-bar. So if you have the boy, then the boy is the noun phrase. The, which is the determiner, should be a sister to X-bar and N-bar, not an N. Take note. For the adjunct rule, adjuncts are daughters of X-bars and sisters to X-bars. So if there are adjuncts in a phrase, they will be daughters of X-bar and sisters to the X-bar as well. And the adjuncts can appear before the X-bar or after the X-bar. They are also optional. So it means you can get phrases where there are no adjuncts. And the last is the complement rule. Daughter of X-bar, sister to X. Now let us use this sentence to explain what we are saying over here. You have this noun phrase and you are asked to draw a tree for it in X-bar. The young student of linguistics with red hair from Phoenix. The young student of linguistics with red hair from Phoenix. Now first of all, the whole of this is a noun phrase. So we have the NP. Now we know these rules of the NP. So we are going to apply it and combine it with the understanding of specifiers, complements, and adjuncts. Now, when you have a noun phrase, this is the first rule. That is the specifier rule. So if you have a noun phrase, NP, the specifier rule says that it projects to a determiner and an N-bar. So here, the determiner is the, and then we have an N-bar. We are done with the specifier rule because we have only one specifier. So the specifier should be a sister to the N-bar and a daughter of the noun phrase. Now that we are done with the specifier rule, let us move on to the adjunct rule. This is where you will find out the adjuncts which are modifying or qualifying the noun. Now we have three adjuncts. We have young. Young is modifying the noun. We have the second adjunct, which is from Phoenix. From Phoenix is also modifying the noun. And we have the last adjunct, a prepositional phrase, which is with red hair. It is also modifying the noun. So how many adjuncts do we have? 3 adjuncts. Now each of these 3 adjuncts, based on our rules of the adjuncts, we are saying that the adjunct must be a daughter of an X-bar and a sister to an X-bar. So first of all, let us project the young student. So this is our specifier rule, the, and then an N-bar. Now let us deal with the first adjunct, that is young. this is an adjective phrase. So this is our first adjunct, and it must be a daughter of an N-bar. So the N-bar immediately dominates the adjective phrase. So it means this adjunct is a daughter of the N-bar. And based on our rule, the adjunct must be a sister to an N-bar, which means young should be a sister to an N-bar. That is what we have here. So we are done with young, which is an adjunct. We are not done with the adjuncts. We have 3 adjuncts. Now the next adjunct is the prepositional phrase from Phoenix, meaning it must be a sister to an N-bar and a daughter of an N-bar. Then we have our last adjunct, that is with red hair, our prepositional phrase. It is also a daughter of an N-bar and a sister to an N-bar. So when you have adjuncts in a phrase, they must be daughters of bar levels and sisters to bar levels. Take note. But when you have a specifier is the daughter of the phrase and then a sister to an X-bar. So take note of that. Now we are done with the adjuncts in this phrase. Of linguistics is a complement. It is not part of our adjuncts. We will explain why shortly. So of linguistics is a complement. Therefore, what did we say about complements? In our noun phrase, this is our complement rule. The complement, that is the PP, should be the sister to an N and a daughter of N bar. Let us see if we have that. We have of linguistics, which is our complement of the noun. It is a sister to an N, the head. So it means that this tree conforms with our 3 rules: the specifier rule, the adjunct rule, and the complement rule. So that's it. That's the meaning of specifiers, complements, and adjuncts based on their relationship with the projections of the phrase. If we say the projections of a phrase, the noun phrase is the maximal projection, and the student, which is the head of the noun, is the minimal projection. All the bar levels are projections of the noun phrase. So that is the relationship between specifiers, adjuncts, and complements to the projections of a phrase. How do you distinguish complements from adjuncts? Let us see. Now consider this sentence: the students of languages and the students from Ghana. We have one modifier in each noun phrase. Of languages qualifies the student, and then in the second one, from Ghana, also qualifies the student. But which of them is the complement and which of them is the adjunct? If we find the one that is the complement, it will help us to draw a correct tree. And if we find the one that is an adjunct, it will also help us to draw the correct tree. Now this is the clue. A quick way to distinguish complements and adjuncts in NPs is that complements of the noun are marked with the preposition of. All other prepositions mark adjuncts. So if you have a noun phrase, if there is an of preposition, then it means that it is a complement. If it is not an of preposition and it is any preposition of any kind, then it means the prepositional phrase is an adjunct. Alright, so let us draw the tree for both of them. Both of them are noun phrases, so that is the maximal projection. So each one of these is a noun phrase. So we first deal with the specifier rule. Now each of these noun phrases has a specifier, which is the. And what do we know about specifiers? They are daughters of phrases, sister to X-bar. In this noun phrase, the specifier, which is the, is a daughter of the noun phrase and a sister of the N-bar. The same thing we have here. The specifier is a daughter of the phrase and a sister to the N-bar. Take notes. Now let us move on to the next level, because we are done with specifiers. We don't have any specifiers here. Now the next level is to look whether we have adjuncts. Now do we have adjuncts in this? No, we don't have any adjuncts. But do we have an adjunct in this phrase? Yes. This is not an off preposition, so from Ghana is an adjunct. And what do we know about adjuncts? We know that for adjuncts, they should be daughters of X-bar and sisters to X-bar, which means that over here, our adjunct, which is from Ghana, should be a daughter of this N-bar and a sister to another N-bar, not an N, not an N. So this is the adjunct rule, daughter of an N-bar and a sister to an N-bar. Now, let us move on to the last rule, which is the complement rule. We didn't have any adjuncts here, but do we have a complement? Yes, we have a complement. And what is that complement? Of languages. So if of languages is our complement, then what did we say? It should be a daughter of X-bar and a sister to X, the head. So here we have our complement of languages, which has become a daughter of an N-bar and a sister of an N. So whenever you have complements, they are sisters to the head and daughters of the N-bar. Whenever you have adjuncts, they are daughters of the N-bar and then sisters to the N-bar. This is one way to distinguish complements from adjuncts in the tree. Let us see other ways that we can distinguish complements from adjuncts. Another way to distinguish complements from adjuncts is that the complement is closest to the head. When you have multiple modifiers, the complements are the closest to the head. Let us take these examples. The student of linguistics from Ghana. We have two qualifiers here, of linguistics and then from Ghana. Now, we are saying that the complements are closest to the head. We know that of prepositional phrases are complements of the noun head. Therefore, of linguistics has been placed closer to the head because it is a complement. All the other qualifiers must be placed after the complement because they will be serving as adjuncts. So if you have more than one qualifier or modifiers, then check the one that is closest to the noun head. If it is a prepositional off phrase, then it is the complement. So we cannot move complements away from the head. For example, it will be wrong if you have a construction like this. The student from Ghana of linguistics. This is wrong. So it should be the student of linguistics from Ghana. That is what we have over here. So the specifier in our noun phrase is the. And we know that specifiers are daughters of phrase and sisters to an N-bar in a noun phrase. We will ask ourselves whether we have adjuncts because adjuncts is the second rule. Of course, we have an adjunct. So this means that the adjunct should come next. We have the adjunct which is from Phoenix. It is the same thing as saying from Ghana. So let's ignore this tiny mistake. So the adjunct is from Phoenix. And we see that from our rule, the adjunct must be a daughter of an X-bar and a sister to an X-bar. So we have from Phoenix, which is the daughter of an N-bar and a sister to an N-bar. Now, we are done with all the adjuncts in the sentence. The next is to check whether we have complements. So what complements do we have? We have of linguistics, and we said that it is the closest to the head. The complement must be a daughter of an X-bar and a sister to the X, which is the head. We have the same thing over here. This is our complement of linguistics, and we can see that it is the daughter of the N-bar and a sister to an N. So this is one way to also distinguish complements from adjuncts. Complements are closest to the head. Now here are some more ways to distinguish complements from adjuncts. There can only be one complement but multiple adjuncts. So if you have a phrase, particularly the noun phrase, there is always one complement but multiple adjuncts. For example, the student of linguistics with the black hair from Ghana in the room. From our adjunct rule, we said that it is iterative. It can occur as many times. This is what we mean. If you have adjuncts, then we can have many adjuncts in the phrase. But if there is a complement, the complement should be just one. it is non-iterative. So from this example, the student of linguistics with the black hair from Ghana in the room. Here we have one adjunct, that is with the black hair. We have another adjunct from Ghana, and then we have our third adjunct in the room. So 3 adjuncts. So we can have multiple adjuncts in a sentence. But how many complements do we have? We have just one complement, that is of linguistics. So it would be wrong to have 2 complements in the phrase. For example, the student of linguistics of physics from Ghana in the room. This is incorrect. Now let us talk about the next property of adjuncts. Adjuncts can be reordered. It means you can change their positions within the phrase, but you cannot do so with the complements. So if you want to test whether a constituent is an adjunct, try to reorder it. If you reorder it and it still makes sense, then it is an adjunct. But if you change its position and it renders the sentence grammatically incorrect, then it becomes a complement. Now, the student of linguistics from Ghana with the black hair in the room can be reordered. We can bring in the room to the front position. So the student of linguistics in the room from Ghana with the black hair. This makes sense. In the same way, we can bring with the black hair in the front position. So we can say the student of linguistics with the black hair in the room from Ghana. But can we do so with the complements that we have? No. Complements do not have that property. Therefore, it will be wrong to say the student with the black hair of linguistics in the room from Ghana. We have separated the complement from its head, and we are not supposed to do that. Complements cannot be reordered, but adjuncts can be reordered. Now, what is the conjoining property of complements and then adjuncts? This is the general rule for conjoining complements and adjuncts. So x raised to the bar n gives us an x raised to the bar n, which is conjoined with an x raised to the bar n. This is what we mean. We mean that you can join complements to complements. For example, the student of economics and of linguistics, of economics and of linguistics are both complements. Therefore, you can join them. You cannot join a complement with an adjunct. The students of economics and with the black hair. This is wrong. This is one property of complements and adjuncts. When you are joining them, make sure that both are complements and both are adjuncts. In the same way, you can join the red and blue house, red and blue, but you cannot say the red and cat. It will be wrong. In the same way, you join adjuncts also to adjuncts. So the students with the red hair and with a tattoo, adjunct to an adjunct. You cannot say the students of linguistics and with red hair. You have joined a complement to an adjunct, which is wrong. So this means that when you are drawing trees for conjoined phrases, make sure that the coordinated constituents are both of the same nature. If you are joining complements, join complements to complements. If you are joining adjuncts, join adjuncts to adjuncts. Now, we can use the one replacement test to see which constituent is an adjunct and which constituent is the complement. How do we do that? So let us target the n bars over here. Now this n bar can be replaced with 1. How? You can say the one from Phoenix. The one from Phoenix. But can you replace student over here with 1? Can you say the one of linguistics from Phoenix? It will be wrong. So if you can replace the head with 1 and the modifier comes after it and it still makes sense, then it means that that modifier or qualifier is an adjunct. So you cannot replace or bring 1 before complements. It will render the construction wrong. So you can say the one of linguistics from Phoenix. It will be. So here is a mistake that you have to avoid when you are drawing trees of this nature. When you have a prepositional phrase modifier or an adjective phrase modifier, you have to be careful to see if it is a complement or an adjunct. So if it is an adjunct, what have we said about adjuncts? It must be sister to X-bar, but and a daughter of X-bar. Take note. So over here we have the big banana. Now adjective phrases are adjuncts, so they must be sisters to what? To N-bars and daughters of an N-bar, since it is an adjunct. So most of you make the mistake because of our phrase structure grammar rules. Whenever you are drawing trees like this in the X-bar, you forget to bring a bar level over here, and then you make the adjective phrase a sister to the N. If you do that, then it is wrong. So always make sure that if you have an adjunct, it is a sister to an N-bar and a daughter of an N-bar. Do not make this mistake. Now we have talked about the noun phrases, but do we have complements and adjuncts in verb phrases as well? Of course. Now in a verb phrase, the only complement is the direct object, in case there is one. So if you have a verb phrase and there are modifiers and qualifiers of the verb phrase, the only complement will be the direct object, if there is any. If there is no direct object, then there is no complement. All the qualifiers and modifiers of that verb will be adjuncts. For example, John often eats apples with a fork. John often eats apples with a fork. Now here, often is not a direct object, so it is an adjunct. Eats is the verb head. Apples will be the direct object, so it becomes our complement. And then with a fork will be our adjunct because it is not the direct object. So in VPs, the direct object is the only complement. It is the only phrase that should be a sister to the V. All the others are adjuncts, so they must be sisters to V-bars and daughters of a V-bar. Take note. Now let us illustrate this verb phrase on our tree. I loved the policeman intensely with all my heart. So we have our verb phrase, loved the policeman intensely with all my heart. First of all, this is a verb phrase, so we have our VP. So we will first apply the specifier rule, and the specifier rule states that this phrase should consist of the specifier and an X-bar. But since verb phrases do not have determinants as specifiers, we will just bring a V-bar. Now we are coming down to the adjunct rules. And what are the adjunct rules? Find all the adjuncts in this verb phrase. We have these qualifiers. We have the policeman, then we have intensely, and we have with all my heart. But which of them is an adjunct and which of them is a complement? Remember that there can only be one complement. So we can say that I loved the policeman, the direct object, but you can say I loved the policeman, the fireman. So our direct object is our complement in this sentence. So loved the policeman becomes our complement, which means that it should be the one that is the closest to loved, which is the head word. But what about the adjuncts? The adjuncts we know can be reordered. So if we are using the reordering to determine the adjuncts, then we will try to reorder the phrases in a sentence. You can say that I loved the policeman with all my heart intensely, or I loved the policeman intensely with all my heart. So it means that intensely and with all my heart are adjuncts. They must be daughters of V-bar and sisters to V-bar. You cannot reorder the complements. This helps us to know which one is the complement and which one is the adjunct. Now, the next way to determine this is using the conjunction test. You can conjoin complements to complements, and you can conjoin adjuncts to adjuncts, but you cannot conjoin complements to adjuncts. So for example, if we are saying that the policeman is a complement, then we can conjoin a complement to a complement. For example, we can say, I loved the policeman and the fireman. Complements. Now we can conjoin adjuncts with adjuncts. So if we are saying that intensely and then with all my heart are adjuncts, then we can conjoin them. How do we do that? We can say, I loved the policeman intensely and with all my heart. It makes sense, which means they are both adjuncts. The last test is the do so replacement. We can also use this test to determine which one is an adjunct and which one is a complement. For example, you can say that Susan loved the policeman intensely with all her heart, but Mary did so with her brain. This means that with her brain or with her or her heart is an adjunct, because we can use did so to replace loved, which is the head word. You can replace the head word when you have an adjunct qualifier, but you can't replace the head word when you have a complement qualifier. So it will be incorrect to say Mary did so the fireman. No, you can't replace the head when you have a complement after the head, but you can replace the head when you have an adjunct after the head. Therefore, we can conclude from our phrase that with all my heart, intensely are adjuncts, and then the policeman becomes our complement. So in our noun phrase, the adjuncts should be daughters of bar levels and then sisters to bars. So here we have our adjuncts, our first adjunct, which is a daughter of a bar and a sister to a bar. The second adjunct, which is a daughter of a bar and a sister to a bar. But the last one is not an adjunct, so it should be a daughter of a bar and then a sister to a head. In our case, it would be the V. Now, how do we determine complements and adjuncts in adjective phrases and then prepositional phrases? Now, in adjective phrases, the of preposition becomes our complements. So, for example, we have very afraid of tigers. Here, very is our adjunct. Afraid is our head. The complement will be of tigers, of tigers. So if it is not an of preposition, then we do not have a complement in an adjective phrase. Now what about the prepositional phrases? This is a very complex prepositional phrase. Prepositional phrases are normally prepositions and then noun phrases, but you can also have this complex structure. So in this structure, very in love with himself, which one is the head? We have in, which is the prepositional head. Very becomes our adjunct. Love, which is the noun phrase, is our complement, which means that in a prepositional phrase, the NP should be a sister to the P, not a sister to a P bar. Take note, the NP should be a sister to the P, not a sister to a P bar. But if we have with himself, it is not the NP, which means it is an adjunct. So take note, in adjective phrases, prepositional of becomes the complements, and in the prepositional phrase, the NP becomes the complement of the P head. Now we haven't talked much about specifiers. The only element that we have seen that it is a specifier is the determiner. So all determinants, whether numerals, whether demonstratives, they are all determinants, articles. These are not real specifiers. We will explain that when we are dealing with determiner phrases. So instead, we will argue that the specifier is where the subjects are generated. So we will generate a new rule for the specifier. It will no longer be an optional D and an N bar. We will talk more about this. So for now, understand that the specifier is a sister to an X bar and a daughter of a phrase. So wherever you see specifiers, you put determinants over there. So let us give a brief summary. A specifier is a sister to X bar and a daughter of a phrase. Adjuncts are sisters to bars and daughters of bars. Complements are sisters to X and daughters of bars. We have these differences between complements and adjuncts. there can only be one complement, but there can be multiple adjuncts. Complements must be the closest to the head. Adjuncts can be reordered. We can use the conjunction test to tell which is a complement and which is an adjunct. So complements are conjoined with complements, adjuncts are conjoined with adjuncts. We can also use the one or the did so test. If you bring it before a complement, it will not make sense. But if you replace the head with any of these before an adjunct, it makes sense. So take note of this. These three things are very important because we are going to learn how to draw trees of the X-bar theory. If you don't understand this, kindly rewind and then listen carefully to the explanations again. Now, we know all the rules of X-bar theory from the noun phrase, verb phrase, adverb phrase, adjective phrase, and prepositional phrase. Now we also understand what complements are, what specifiers are, and what adjuncts are. It is time to learn how to draw trees. Remember that we have not talked about functional categories. We haven't talked about the determiner phrase, the DP. We haven't talked about the CPs, and we haven't talked about the TPs. So here we are focusing on how to draw the trees from phrase levels, and I'm going to guide you through a step-by-step approach to drawing accurate trees in X-bar theory. For Andrew Carney, he suggests that we draw the tree from bottom up. However, I identified that the bottom up approach is sometimes a challenge for students, especially for students who are second language learners. So I am going to teach you the approach to draw the trees from top to the bottom, and it is going to be very easy. Now, what is the first step? Check and put an XP on top of the projections. So no matter the phrase that you are given, the top of the projection should be an XP. So if you are given a prepositional phrase, the top of the projection should be a PP. If you are given a verb phrase, the top of the projection should be a VP. If you are given a noun phrase, the top of the projection should be an NP. So put XP, the type of phrase, on the top of the projections. Now after that, then we move to the next step. Step 2. Attach the specifier if there is one. So for noun phrases, you sometimes get specifiers, that is the determiner. So if there is a determiner, then you attach it to the N bar. So make sure that the specifier is a sister to an N bar. For the other phrases, you don't have specifiers, so it will move straight towards to the bar levels of that phrase. Now from here, the step 3 is to check for adjuncts. So check whether adjuncts are in the phrase. If you find adjuncts, then they must be phrases. So this is the second rule. So in the noun phrase, if you are applying the second rule, check for adjuncts. So if you see that there is an adjective modifying the noun, you must make sure that that adjective on your tree is an adjective phrase which is modifying an N bar. So you will still apply your rules. Now, this is what you have to know when you are attaching adjuncts. First of all, each adjunct gets its own X bar mother and X bar sister. So make sure that on top of any adjunct, there is an X bar. So for example, on top of any adjunct of the noun phrase, there must be an N bar. Then that adjunct should be a sister to the N bar. If it is a prepositional phrase, it should be a sister to the N bar and a daughter of the N bar. So take note. Now, if there are 3 adjuncts in the sentence, it means that you are going to repeat your bar levels so that they will all have bar sisters and bar mothers. Take note. Now, the next step is to identify your head and attach the complement. We know that the complement is the last rule. Therefore, this is the last rule. You identify the head of the phrase. So in this case, if you are using the verb phrase, the head is the V. And then if there is a complement, you attach it. So the complement of the verb is always the direct object. So if there is a direct object, then you attach it. Make that direct object a sister to the V, not V bar. Take note. So for the last rule, the complement should be a sister to the head, not a bar, except the adverb rule. So here are some key points that you have to note. You have to determine whether the modifier is a complement, adjunct, or specifier. So first of all, find your specifiers. It should be placed after your phrasal level. Then you attach all the adjuncts by repeating the bars. Then at the end, you attach the complement, which is a phrase. All the adjuncts should be phrasal. Take note. And you attach a complement, which is also a phrase, to the head of the phrase. Remember this. Adjuncts are sisters to X bars. Take note. And complements to X. Now let us move on to the last step. Forget this step 4. The last step is that check your tree against your rules. So the rules that we have, if you finish drawing your tree, start checking it. So start at the top and test if each set of lines can be generated by the rules. So you put your tree diagram to test. Check if all the trees, all the branches that you have, all the nodes, everything that you've drawn is in accordance with the rules. Now let us get practical. Here is one thing that you have to know. If there is a phrase and the phrase contains only one word, for example, in noun phrases, when you have proper nouns, they don't have modifiers or qualifiers. You have only one word noun phrase. If that is the case, then this is the minimal form. The XP will move to X bar and then to X, which means if you have a phrase that is only one word, the minimal form should be, so in a noun phrase, if you have only one word as the noun phrase, it should be NP moves to, which moves to N bar, which moves to N. Then you write the noun below it. If it is a verb phrase and it is only one word, you will have to break it down from VP to V bar and then V left. Now if it is an AdjP and there are no modifiers or qualifiers, it will move to AdJ bar and AdJ. If it is an adverb phrase with no modifiers or qualifiers, it moves to AdV bar and AdV. If it is a prepositional phrase, it will move to a P bar and a P. Take note. So never ever write PP and write before. No. Don't also do PP, move to P bar, then you come and write the before. Even if it is one word, it must have 3 levels. Take note. Now let us solve this. The student from Phoenix. Now go back to the steps. Write all the steps down or screenshot it and follow the steps to draw your tree. You will see how easy it gets. Now the student from Phoenix. First of all, identify your groups. Here we have a noun phrase, the student from Phoenix. So that will be the top level. We have identified that this structure is a noun phrase. Now this noun phrase has a determiner there. It has a noun head and then a prepositional phrase which is qualifying it. So you will first ask yourself questions. First, since we are drawing it from up to down, then we need to ask ourselves whether there is a specifier, because that is the first rule. So the specifier is the, which means our noun phrase is going to consist of the specifier and an N bar. This is the tree that you are going to get. The specifier, the, and then an N bar. We are done with specifiers. So we check to see whether there are adjuncts. And of course, from Phoenix is an adjunct. It is not a complement. And what did we say about adjuncts? Adjuncts are daughters of N bar. We already have our N bar. And they are sisters to the N bar as well. This N bar will give us the adjunct, which is the prepositional phrase from Phoenix. This prepositional phrase, according to our adjunct rule, should be a sister to an N bar, not N. So take notes. So here we have our N bar and our adjunct from Phoenix. Now from here, do we have any other adjuncts? No. So since there are no adjuncts again, and there is no complement of this noun, then we can go ahead and bring our head word, because the minimal form of the noun phrase should be an NP, an N bar, and an N. We already have our NP. we have our n bars, so it was left with n. Now all that you have to do is to break down this prepositional phrase, which is very easy. Now this prepositional phrase from Phoenix does not contain any adjuncts. This over here is not an adjunct, it is a complement. So we don't have any adjunct. We'll move on to the complement rule. So this p bar that we have here will move to a p preposition, which is from, and then our noun phrase, which is a complement. It cannot be a sister to a bar, because complements are always sisters to heads. Take note. So we will have from, then the np, which is Phoenix. We will break down the Phoenix to have the minimal form of the noun phrase structure. So the np will move down to an n bar and then to an n. If you follow the steps one after the other and you apply the rules, then you are good to go. Let us have another example. So here is the first example that we've done. The student from Phoenix. What if it were to be the student of linguistics? What is the difference? Now over here, from our earlier discussions, we know that from Phoenix is an adjunct, but of linguistics is a complement. So there is going to be a slight change in our tree. Now let us do it. First of all, this is a noun phrase, so we have our NP. Now this NP that we have has a specifier. So from top to down, you first do specifiers. So this specifier is the, and this specifier should be, according to our rule, a sister towards an n bar. That is what we have here. Now from this n bar, that is student of linguistics, we can see that of linguistics is not an adjunct. Therefore, we do not have an adjunct, so we can't apply any adjunct rule. This means we will apply the complement rule. So this n bar has an n, not an n bar. Take note, we are applying the complement rule because of linguistics is not an adjunct. So this n bar has an n, student, and this student should be a sister to the complement, or the complement should be a sister to the noun head. So we have our complement of linguistics, and from here you can break it down very easily. What is the minimal form of the prepositional phrase? So it will first move what? A p bar. Then you ask yourself whether there are qualifiers or adjuncts in this prepositional phrase. We don't have that, so it means that the linguistics over here is a complement of the preposition. Therefore, we bring from p bar, we apply the complement rule. We bring our p and then our np. What is our np? It consists of only one word. So even if it consists of only one word, the minimal form should be an np, which moves to an n bar and then to an n, which is linguistics. Here, if you want to know whether you are correct, then you start checking it with the rules that we have. Let us move on to look at the verb phrase. You have a sentence. Andy frequently eats sushi with his boss. Now we are focusing on the verb phrase since we haven't done the TPs. Frequently eats sushi with his boss. Frequently is an adjunct. Eats is the head. Sushi is a complement. Why is sushi a complement? Note that for verb phrases, we mentioned that only the direct object is the complement. So here, sushi is our direct object. It becomes our complement. And then we have our adjunct with its boss, which means that this verb phrase has a head, one complement, and two adjuncts. Now there is something that you must know about adjuncts. Here is the trick. If you want to know the number of bar levels that you will get for the adjuncts, count the number of adjuncts. So here we have one adjunct, two adjuncts. Then you add 1 to the number you get. So we add 1 to 2, which means we are going to get 3 bar levels. Let us test this with our tree. Now this entire structure is a VP. So we would have a VP over here. Now from this VP, we know that from our VP rules, we move on to a V bar. Since the VP doesn't have any specifier, it moves straight to a V bar. Now from the V bar, we will move on to the adjunct rule. So you ask yourself, how many adjuncts do we have? We have frequently and we have with his boss 2. So you are going to get 3 bar levels. We shall see. Now which of the adjuncts should you do first? Is it the frequently or with his boss? Any of them is correct. So we can have two different trees for this structure. So first of all, let us first deal with frequently. Now frequently is an adjunct, an adverb phrase. Note that all adjuncts should be phrases and sisters to the bar levels and daughters to the bar levels. So take note, don't come and write ADV. It should be AdvP. Then you break it down. We don't want to worry ourselves so much about breaking down the parts that are not necessary, the adjuncts. We are done with frequently. It is a sister to a bar level. Now, are the adjuncts finished? No. We have another adjunct with this box, which means we need another vein bar, because adjuncts are sisters to a vein bar. So whenever you have adjuncts, then you are going to have a bar level. So we have our vein bar, which should be sister to the adjuncts that we are dealing with, which is with this box. Do we have any other adjuncts again? No. It means we can't repeat the bar levels. We are done. So we move on to the complement rule. Now, what is the complement rule in VPs? Find the VP. The complement rule is that the V bar should move to a V, the verb, and then the complement of the verb, which is the direct object. So here we have our V, which is eats, and then the complement of V, which is sushi. This is not the entire structure. You can go ahead and break this noun phrase down. So here, how many V bars did we have? We had 1, 2, 3. So if you want to determine the number of bar levels that you have in a phrase, you can count the number of adjuncts that you have, because it is the adjuncts that give rise to multiple bar levels. So if you have 2 adjuncts, then you are going to get 3 bar levels. I hope this helps. Now, what is the alternative of this tree diagram? Remember that the adjuncts can be reordered. That is why we have alternatives. So someone can also choose to first attach with his boss first. That one is also correct. Let's do that. This is the tree that we are going to get. So if you decide to treat with his boss first, then your VP will move on to the V bar. Now you are coming to attach your adjuncts, but we are starting with his boss. So with his boss over here will be a sister to a bar level, because it is an adjunct. You can continue and break down this prepositional phrase. Now from this bar level, you ask yourself whether there is an adjunct again. Of course, there is frequently. Therefore, you will need your adverb phrase. Frequently is an adverb, so you need an adverb phrase. This adverb phrase, since it is an adjunct, should also be a sister to a verb bar. That is what we have here. Now, you can go ahead and break down your adverb phrase in your notes or jotter. Now, this verb bar, you ask yourself whether we have any other adjuncts again. We don't have, which means we have terminated the adjunct rule. We are moving on to the complement rule. And what is the complement rule? The V, that is the head, is a sister to the noun phrase. So, eats becomes our head word, and it should be a sister to the noun phrase, that is sushi. You can break this noun phrase down as well. So take your time, go through the steps one after the other, and you will draw a great trees. Let us try another one. The red dress with the pink stripes. This, we can have 2 different trees. Why do you think we will have 2 different trees? This is because we have 2 adjuncts. So someone will choose to treat the first one first, red. Someone will choose to attach the with the pink stripes first. So either way, you are going to generate 2 different trees. So let us start. What kind of phrase is this? It is an NP. So this NP, does it have a specifier? Yes, the. So you bring the specifier, and the specifier rule states that the D, the determiner, should be a sister to a bar level. Don't forget to apply your rules. So we bring a bar level. Now this bar level that we have over here means that we are now coming to do the intermediate categories, the adjuncts. Now you ask yourself the number of adjuncts that you have. So we have 1 that is red, and then with the pink stripes, which means we have 2 adjuncts. So how many bar levels are we going to get in our phrase? 3 bar levels. You add 1 to the number of adjuncts in the phrase. So we are going to get 3 bar levels. So here, from here, we move on to first attach our first adjunct, that is red, AdjP. So AdjP, that is the adjective phrase red, you can break it down. It will move to an AdJ bar and then to an AdJ. then you write your red. This AdjP will be a sister to an N bar because it is an adjunct. So don't forget the adjunct rules. Now from the N bar, you ask yourself whether we have an adjunct again. Of course we have. The prepositional phrase with the pink stripes. So here with the pink stripes should also be the sister to a bar level, an N bar, not an N, because it is not a complement but an adjunct. Do we have any other adjuncts again? No. So this means that we are done with our adjunct rule. So we will apply the complement rule. But here we do not have any complement because there is no of preposition. Therefore, from our N bar, it will move to an N and then dress. This is because we already have the NP. So the minimal form is NP, N bar, and N. So we have our NP, we have our N bars, so we just bring an N. That's it. Now this is the alternative structure. If you decide to attach the prepositional phrase first, then this is how the tree is going to look like. You can pause the video and have a look at it. So here we have with pink stripes, which is a prepositional phrase. It should be a sister to the N bar. Then from here you ask yourself whether there is an adjunct again. Of course there is an adjective phrase. It should also be a sister towards an N bar. Then you break down the N bar. This is becoming very easy. So you just have to take note of all the rules, then apply what you know from complements, adjuncts and specifiers, and you are good to go. Now let us move on to a bigger structure. The man from Brazil bought a book of poems in the paddle. What do we have? We have a sentence, but we don't know the rules for TPs, DPs and the CPs yet. Therefore, we will just maintain the phrase structure rules for the TP. That is, if you have a sentence, you will first have a TP. This rule will change later, so don't worry. Now you have a TP. Every TP we know from phrase structure has an NP and a VP. We will stick to it. Now this is what we are going to do. First, let's deal with the noun phrases. Now don't we know how to deal with noun phrases in X-bar? We have seen it from the previous video. We know how to also expand the VP in X-bar. So this should be very easy for us. So identify your noun phrase. The man from Brazil. That is our noun phrase. Now, do we have a specifier? Of course. We have the determiner there. So first, specifier rule. It should be a sister to an N bar. So that is what we've done here. Then you ask yourself whether we have adjuncts. Do you have adjuncts? Yes. From Brazil is an adjunct. It is not a complement. Therefore, this N bar should generate another N bar because the adjunct from Brazil should be a sister to a bar level and a daughter to a bar level. So we have our N bar and then our prepositional adjunct, that is from Brazil. Now from here, we do not have any adjuncts again in the noun phrase. So we just go ahead and then bring our head word. Then we break down this prepositional phrase. Every prepositional phrase, since it doesn't have any determiner as a specifier, moves on to a P bar. Now this P bar, that is from Brazil, has the preposition from. So applying the rules of the preposition, it will move on to the preposition from. Now since the NP is the object or the complement of the preposition, we do not bring a bar again for the preposition. No, because it is the complement rule that we are applying here. So the P is a sister to the NP. Now this NP that we have here is Brazil. It is what? A proper noun. Therefore, it is one word. So from NP, we get an N bar, then an N. This should be Brazil, so don't worry about the phoenix. You can replace it with Brazil. We are done with the first part of the sentence. Let us move on to the VP. Now the VP starts from bought a book of poems in the paddle. Now when you have multiple prepositional phrases, it creates ambiguity. First of all, you can interpret it this way. Bought a book of poems. Now a book of poems, the whole of this is a noun phrase. Of poems is the complement of the noun. And where was it purchased? In the paddle. So take your time and identify all the phrases that go together. First of all, we have our verb head. Then we have our direct object, a book of poems. So this should be the last thing that you do in the verb phrase, because in the paddle is our adjunct. So what is the rule for verb phrases? It moves to a VIN bar. We already know this because verb phrases do not have specifiers or determinants. Now from the VIN bar, you ask yourself whether there are adjuncts. Of course, in the paddle is an adjunct. Therefore, in the paddle, we'll create another VIN bar. Then we'll have in the paddle. Now this VIN bar here is bought a book of poems. Remember, bought a book of poems. Now, does bought a book of poems contain an adjunct? No, which means we don't need any bar level again. A book of poems becomes a noun phrase, which is the object of bought, which means it is a complement. So every complement should be a sister to a V according to our rules, not a V bar. So it should be bought, then the complement, which is a noun phrase. So noun phrases, which are direct objects, shouldn't be sisters to a VIN bar. It should be a sister to what? To the head. Take note. Go back and check your rules again. Now we have a book of poems. This is a book of poems. So we have a noun phrase. So we will apply the rule from up to down. Therefore, do we have a specifier? The specifier is a. Then we have book of poems, an N bar. Remember, specifiers are sisters to the N bar. Now, if that is the case, then we can break down the N bar, book of poems. Now, this N bar contains, book of poems contains a complement, not an adjunct, which means we don't need another bar level. So we know that all specifiers are sisters to a bar level. Therefore, we bring our N bar. Then we can go ahead and break down this N bar, that is book of poems. So since of poems is a complement, we don't need another N bar again. It is not an adjunct. Therefore, we have the noun head, which is book, and then we can break down the prepositional phrase of poems. Now, every prepositional phrase moves to a P bar. Therefore, we have a P bar which has the preposition of. Remember that the noun phrase is always a complement of the preposition. So you don't repeat another P bar before you bring your noun phrase. Now, this noun phrase generates an N bar and then to an N, which is the poems. Now we can go ahead and break down our adjunct, that is in the paddle. I hope you can do that. So in the paddle moves on to a P bar. Then since the noun phrase is a complement of the preposition, we bring our P, which is in, and then we break down the noun phrase. This noun phrase has a specifier. So the specifier is always a sister to the N bar. So we have the, then an N bar. This N bar moves to what? To N, which is paddle. So this is how to apply the rules and the knowledge you have on complements, adjuncts, and then specifiers. Just apply everything. When you are done, compare it with your rules and check whether you are right. In our next lesson, we will expand this X-bar theory to functional categories like the TP, the CP, and then the DP.